Hello and welcome back to another video. This video is stemming off the two previous posts that I made on my blog, one being the wind effector and turbulence settings that I tweaked around with in this exact project right now you can see on screen, and also the material setup, the one with the explosion with the luminance changing, varying on the particle speed. So I've just deleted the pre-existing X-Particles material and re-inserted the material that I created with the luminance one. So I've just added that to the scene, and here I didn't actually realise, but I've only added it to the. So there's two particle emitters. There's one with large particles and one with lots of small ones. I've only added it to the small one. So in the top right you can see a material, the big black question mark in it. I didn't quite spot this, so that's why I'm quite puzzled as to why there's very few particles in the scene right now, especially when rendered. However, I soon twig on. So, but yeah, this was basically tying those two posts together. I'm near enough finalising my final asset, this X particle ring. I was testing them individually as it made it a lot easier to see, because if the luminance properties were enabled, so the particles that were still, if they were black, it would have been much more difficult to see within the render. So I thought it was a lot easier just to do them separately, especially with the turbulence. The turbulence would have been near enough invisible without the colours of the particles. So I'm now tying them all back together into this, and pretty much to my surprise, straight off the bat, it starts to resemble something quite nice. So within this render right now, you can see that there's a lot of particles in there that are coloured, but then quite clearly you can see there are also some which aren't. And with the quick birth and death rate of the particles, I think in the initial particle emitter inside the X-particle system, so if you look halfway down you have like an XP system with an orange icon. The particle emitter in there actually has a quick death and birth rate. So I think the birth rate is every 30 frames about 800 particles are emitted, and they survive for around 30 frames. So you get quite a lot of bright flashes and then dying, and then you just get constant repetitive waves, which is quite nice. And I'm hoping the project is actually rendering as we speak, but I'm hoping that with the turbulence enabled on the particles, that it has a really nice and aesthetically pleasing effect. So within the project right now, so I'm just turning off ambient occlusion and global illumination just to try and speed up the renders. Although they do add a nice effect in this part, when I was adjusting it really didn't make sense. So just trying to check for fine details, because I actually couldn't see any changes in particles. So right there's a good example of some of the particles colour channels turning off or mid-frame. And I'm just trying to double check to make sure that it all looks good and there's actually variation between frame to frame, variation from frame to frame, sorry. It is at this stage, after I added the material and tried tweaking around, that it was basically just fine tuning. So I spent a lot of time in the material editor right now tweaking settings. So I'm changing the speed, the maximum speed, and bringing that down to see what that does. I think overall the final setting I left it at the speed is 20, because the actual particle speed was 25. So maybe I should have put that a bit higher, but then also tried playing around with the gradient, which you'll see in a little moment. But I kind of discovered that stretching the gradient made overall, like, the vast majority of particles pretty much decolorize, if that's a word, or lose their colour, because it was basically being stretched out, and that's not really what I was after. I was basically after the very, very stationary particles, so they want just up to the point where they stop moving, that they turn off. And I think with the settings that I've finished on, that it made quite a nice effect. So then just bumping up the specular as well. So the specular, for those that don't know, the specular is basically the kind of glow. If a light's shining on a glossy object, it has like a white glow or a white reflection. That's what the specular is. And the light settings itself is actually a specular light, and all the particles themselves are self-illuminating. So that's basically it to the whole scene. There's a lot of information thrown there, apologies for that, but that was the vast majority of it. None of the settings were really tweaked else apart from that, but thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoyed the video.